Ron Paul is truly an American hero, a doctor, a congressman, served in the military, really probably the only politician that truly knows how the money and how the monetary system works at the highest of levels. And this is why he had so much fervor, especially in the young people, 14, 15 years ago when he was running for president, and really all the times he ran for president, because he was speaking truth to the people and they understood it. They understood it from deep down. So I'm going to read this article really quick because this is why most people cannot get ahead in life. We're going to continue beating this literally into the ground. I'm going to beat this dead horse until every single person on earth understands this. The inflation and tax assault on the American people. And this goes back to Russia and understanding how do you break capitalism? How do you break free markets? How do you break the will of the Americans? How do you break the will of the people? And it goes back to grinding them. As Lenin and Stalin knew, grind them in between taxation and inflation. And you will grind them down until there's nothing left. And their will be broken, and you have them in the palm of your hand. So Ron Paul here. According to the January report, the Consumer Price Index, inflation decreased by 0.5% this last month. This follows a 0.1% increase in December. The total increase over the last 12 months is 6.4%. The official government statistics, which are manipulated to understand the true rate of price inflation, go to shadowstats.com to see the true inflation rates, show even greater increases in some costs. Over the last 12 months, food prices increased by 10.1%. Energy prices increased by 8.7%, and shelter costs rose by 7.9%. The government figures also record a 0.2% decline in real wages in January and a 1.8% decline from a year earlier. Wow, that's even worse. Add that on to the inflation rate, basically. Keep in mind that actual real wages losses have been larger because the government's real wage numbers are calculated using the government's understated price inflation numbers. So think about that. The disparity, they're screwing you on the inflation numbers and they're screwing you on the wage numbers. So the gap is even larger, probably 2, 3, 4, 5, it's already, the inflation is already three times off, 3%, 3 times worse. And then as I have kids screaming in the background because they can't stand inflation. And they're learning about it right now. My 6, 4, and 2-year-old learning about inflation and how that affects you and how it destroys all savers, how it destroys a society. So, and they can't stand it. That's why they're crying in the background. And so they're screwing you on the way they calculate both ends of the numbers, meaning that wealth gap, in the gap there, it looks like this, but it's really that. The Federal Reserve caused a decline in purchasing power disproportionately harms middle and lower income Americans, which we talk about all the time, many of whom are already living paycheck to paycheck before the Federal Reserve's unprecedented money currency, it's currency, not money, Ron, it's currency creation, caused especially large increases in price inflation. And again, why is it that it's currency, not money? Currency is not backed by anything. It's just fiat currency. It's backed by nothing, backed by decree. Money has to be a store of value. So Bitcoin, gold, silver, those are things of actual value, actual energy that it took to mine those things. According to a Morning Consult survey from June of 2022, price inflation has caused over 40% of U.S. consumers to eat out less. This obviously reduces the opportunity of wait staff to earn tips that constitute a significant portion of their incomes. This loss is in addition to the lost income from during the coronavirus scare, and when many restaurants either close entirely or offer takeout or delivery. The reduction in tip income is not stopping the Internal Revenue Service from trying to squeeze more taxes out of waiters and waitresses. The tax agency has announced this month that the creation of the Service Industry Tip Compliance Agreement, SITCA program, as the name suggests, the program will allow the tax agency to collect data on tips directly from restaurants instead of relying on employees to report their tips. Interesting. Very interesting. So I thought that all these IRS agents and all these things, reporting $600 of income, all that. No, we're just doing that to get the big guys. Really? I didn't know all the rich people were collecting tips. Sitka is one of the first initiatives to use some of the $80 billion in additional funding provided to the IRS in last year's Inflation Reduction Act. Oh, so they're coming after even more. Well, saddle up. You get what you vote for, right? Elections have consequences. So you think the average person, poor middle class, have voted for, we'll say Joe Biden, but really the collectivist party, which is probably most people in Washington, but you keep voting for people that keep saying, I'm going to give you more. Well, what they do is they say, okay, well, here, I'm going to trade you some of your wealth and your freedom, and then I'm going to give you free things. But I'm going to give you a fraction of what I just stole from you. Translation. They enabled the IRS to crack down on millionaire and billionaire tax cheats, as Bernie and Elizabeth Warren constantly opined. President Biden and the bureaucrats running the IRS must think there are a lot of waiters and waitresses making billions in tips. At the time of the bill's passage, many opponents of increasing the IRS's enforcement budget predicted the agency would use the additional funds to target middle and lower income Americans. After all, unlike wealthier individuals, these Americans cannot afford to pay tax attorneys and accountants to make sure they minimize their tax liability without violating the tax law. Also, wealthy taxpayers are more likely and able to fight an IRS audit. In contrast, lower income Americans are more likely to pay whatever the tax agency demands in order to make it go away, since they don't have the resources to fight it. When I was in Congress, I introduced legislation to make tips tax-free. Tips are a gift provided by customers to show appreciation to servers. Very rarely is there a contractual obligation for a customer to add a tip, much less a predetermined amount to his bill. There is no reason to tax tips other than the government's desire to take more money from working people. So kind of like the Soviets said, grind them between the millstones of taxation and inflation. Interesting. The fact, and that would break the will of society. The fact that the funding the IRS was given to prevent the wealthy from avoiding taxes is actually being used to target waiters, which anyone with 2 brain cells said would happen, like you mentioned earlier, is an example of how the welfare warfare state harms working Americans. Here you go. The government is literally there to conduct the law and just make sure the law works and protecting borders and national security. That's it. That's literally what the United States government was there for. But now look what they're in bed with. Now they're in charge of the warfare machine, the welfare machine, doling out, redistributing wealth to everybody. And so they punish producers and reward people for sitting at home. Beautiful. What a system. At the same time, the lower and middle income Americans are harmed the most by the Federal Reserve's inflation tax. The best thing Congress could do to help Americans improve their standard of living and climb the economic ladder is to kill the monsters of 1913, the Federal Reserve and the IRS. Those, ironically, the year that both those were created, and I would say go to a Bitcoin standard as well. You can absolutely eradicate. If you go to a Bitcoin standard, these will take care of themselves. The Federal Reserve, the IRS probably won't exist, but we absolutely should take those out. Absolutely should be gone. I don't know how we don't have flat tax or consumption tax that would equally tax all people. But that's neither here nor there. So, beautiful article. I usually don't read articles on here, but Ron Paul is a classic. And this is the 2 important things of our time here: inflation and taxes, destroying the middle class purposely, might I add. This is, again, if I say this all the time, if people truly wanted to do what was right and fix things, we could fix things. There are a lot of smart people in government, even though we rag on them all the time. There's a lot of smart people, But it's profitable to keep the people dependent on yourself and keep you in power. That's how people keep their power. The number 1 rule of a politician to get elected. Number 2 role is to get reelected. So that's where you have it. And if we had people that had morality and had ethics and had values, they would do what was right. They'd serve a term or 2 and then they leave. And they would do what was right for the people. But so few people have actual real life skills nowadays. They can't, think about all the people in Congress. Most of them have never worked a job in their life. They don't have any real jobs or any real skills. So they go, they're like, hey, I just went to law school and I'm an attorney now. Have you practiced? Do you know how to talk to people, communicate, negotiate, sales, anything? No, most people don't. Most of them have no idea what real life is like. Look at Joe Biden. The guy who's 50 plus years in public service Bernie Sanders never had a real job in their life. Barack Obama never had a real job in their life. And I'm sure there's others I'm missing. Many, most of them. And you could throw in the comments. Let me know who I'm missing. But those are 3 massive ones that actually they're super prominent people that are the people are always like, oh, we need to take from the wealthy, the millionaires and billionaires, but yet they have no idea because they don't know how to make money on their own. Obama became president. These people got wealthier as they made more deals in public service, right? Obama literally was worth nothing, and then he's worth $100 million when he comes out as president. And the same thing, Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, guys got 3 houses, Bernie Sanders. So what are we doing here at the end of the day, right? Let's develop some real skills. Bitcoin, getting rid of the Federal Reserve and IRS would be a massive step, but Bitcoin is a sly roundabout way that restricts government from spending your future and makes everyone more prosperous and brings down the cost of living. So let me know your thoughts here. I appreciate you coming to my TED Talk, and this is not financial advice, it's freedom advice. That is it. That is all. And I appreciate your time and energy. It's the most important asset we have. Time is Bitcoin, and Bitcoin is time. And I look forward to seeing you on the next one.